Hello and welcome to the Help My Wealth podcast, Money Rules or Money Rules. Here at Help My Wealth, we are all about empowering financial success in our community of listeners. We hope you find today's topic both informative and helpful. Hi and welcome to the Help My Wealth podcast, Money Rules, Money Rules. I'm your host, Stephen Logan, and with me as always is Hamish Ferguson. Hamish, thank you for coming.
No problems at all, Steve. Lovely to be here.
Hamish is a founding member of Help My Wealth and also one of the experienced professionals who author the learning modules that we use on investments. Today we have our special guest, which is Krystle Parker, who is a business owner of Verve Partners in Newcastle. Krystle, could you please tell our audience a little bit about Verve and yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm one of the directors at Verve Partners. Verve Partners being the name for since the beginning of the year, so the last sort of 8 months. Previously Monica Claire, which has been in business for around about 7.5 years. We are a recruitment and HR consultancy firm. And have work across multiple disciplines within the white collar sector of recruiting temporary and permanent in Newcastle, and we have an office in Wollongong as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
And so you've been with them for how long now?
I've been with them for 3 years, been in the recruitment industry for over 15 years.
Just a short time.
Just a short time. Started when I was a baby.
Yeah.
It's a small world. I met Elizabeth from Randstad the other day, who I believe you used to work with. Yes,
I did.
Anyway, so we didn't talk much about you, but it was just interesting to sort of go, okay, small world, because I didn't realise you were in recruitment beforehand. For some reason, I thought you were doing something a little bit left field of that. So
Anyway. Well, not too much to talk about anyway.
No, all good.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about, I guess, the white collar professionals, so you guys, my understanding is you've got specialists in different industries. Is that right?
Do. Yeah. So we work across a broad range of disciplines that ranges from legal, engineering, construction, marketing, HR, IT, and then your general office support and account support side of things. And then my business partner and one of my other directors, Simon, he runs our executive search arm of the business as well. So we do that high-end exec search, and that's Australia-wide, so that he can, really tap into that market.
Yeah, okay. All right. And so we'll probably talk a little bit about, the recruitment industry and that sort of thing a little bit later. But coming back to what Steve was saying, so tell us a little bit about you as well and your journey and how did you end up at Verve?
Yeah. So as I said, 15 years in recruitment. I worked for a tier 1 firm prior to coming over called Randstad, and I was with them for close to 12 years. And I actually had crossed paths with Claire, my business partner and co-founder of Verve Partners. Founder, a number of times, and she had offered me to come over and join her in the space of 2.5 years twice, and I politely declined. I wasn't quite ready at that point in time, and I always said to her, if anything changed, she would be the first to know. And during COVID, there were a few things, I guess, that were challenging as a manager, because I was the state manager for our blue collar business across New South Wales and had multiple branches, and there were a lot of decisions that had to be made that unfortunately didn't sit well with me. It was very impactful for employees and quite difficult knowing the impacts that I was having on their livelihoods. So I had made a decision at that point in time that my alignment was no longer there. It was time to go, but unfortunately, it wasn't a great time. It was in June 2020, right in the middle of COVID. So I did ring Claire and said, look, I did always promise you'd be my first call, and I know this is the worst time ever for you to receive this call, but I've left Randstad and I'm available, and I'll be looking for my next journey. And in true fashion of Claire, oh my God, she's like, oh, what do I do with that information? I will call you back. And I think I had a call back within 15 minutes, and she said, we are meeting tomorrow.
Right.
So
after you've done your COVID test.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and then the rest is history. I started with the business in August 2020.
I think COVID was a big disruptor for a lot of people. people. So, you hear that story so often with people changing jobs or rethinking about their life or their direction or where they wanted to go. It really pushed forward probably, where people were heading anyway, but it brought it forward a lot further. Would you say that's probably similar for you? It made you think through that?
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely correct. And COVID itself, and this is very, very common trend that had occurred, it gave everyone a self-reflection moment.
Totally.
What am I doing? Do my values and my ethics still align with this organisation and this employer? And, have I only just been, working here because, I just didn't want to have to go through the change?
Yeah.
So everyone went through that self-reflection moment of really, what am I here for? And I think that's also reflective of the fact that because everyone had to slow down, they had time to think about it.
Yes.
So that's where the impact of, people moving, changing industries, changing sectors, starting whole new careers in completely different areas have come from, because the self-reflection, and you're absolutely correct. I had that self-reflection moment because I knew that my alignment was no longer there.
Yeah. And I've heard that a lot. Anyone from, something as sort of like a barry or someone working in a cafe right through to high-end industry, people were like, hang on, is this what I want to be doing? I've been here for 3 years or 4 years or treading water, or, maybe when COVID's over I should look at something else.
Yeah, and to give context to the first two times where, Claire had spoken to me and said, come and join us, and made those offers, I guess the reason I declined was, I have to make the move and it's a complete change. Like, I know everything where I am, and you've got to go through, different processes and different systems and different ways. And, when you've been for somewhere for so long, like 12 years is a really long time, you've got a sense of comfortability.
Totally.
And it's pushing yourself to get out of that comfort level. But, I was very comfortable until I wasn't. Yeah.
And then it was time to go.
Yeah.
So look, with recruiting, it's not the sort of job you just walk into. You didn't sort of, go and do a recruiting course and get your recruiting bit of paper and start. So how did you actually get into that industry? Where did you sort of come from?
So recruitment isn't really anything anyone sets out to do. Everyone that I have spoken to, they naturally fall into the industry. I was previously in real estate. So as a real estate agent, sales agent, for about 6 or 7 years. And I come to learn very quickly within the real estate game, and we're talking quite some time ago, it was still very much a male-dominant industry, bit of a boys' club. So it was very, very rare that you'd come across females in those sales roles, very different to what it is now. But, there were sacrifices that females had to make in the industry back then, around families and things like that. And I guess I started to think about, okay, what would it look like when I eventually got to that point of not being able to be around for kids' sporting games and things like that, knowing that it's a weekend job. So that's when I started to really put my feelers out there and sort of say, what else is out there for me to really utilise my skill set and be able to have it as a transferable skill. And I went to see 2 recruitment firms, and I sat down with one of them who was, their name at the time was Select Appointments, but they then were acquired by the Randstad group once I'd started. And they just said, would you consider recruitment? I said, well, I'd definitely give it a go.
I'm here, I can interview.
Why not? Yeah, absolutely. And it was only a very small, Select Appointments was a very large firm at that point in time. The location in Newcastle was only a very small office. And at that point in time, they had tried with 3 other consultants to really lift the business support. So that's your general office support division off the ground, and they hadn't had any success. And they said they did explain that in the interviews, and they sort of said, you will be the last attempt to lift this off the ground for us. Otherwise, we're going to close that part of the business in Newcastle. So there was definitely no pressure, but I was up for the challenge, and I was ready to do it and show them that we could definitely build it.
So I'm interested, a lot of people have said over the years that, first job, if you can get a job with Macca's, it's a good place to start, right? So what did real estate teach you that has helped you make successful today?
Well, I mean, real estate wasn't the first job I had. I'd been in as a travel consultant prior to that, and a few different other things, but the skills in that was really being able to build relationships and being able to converse with a broad range of people from all different diverse backgrounds, and it creates a level of influential skills, negotiation skills, and probably the biggest thing, which I tend to believe was lacking in the industry back then, was establishing a base of trust. It's one of those things where a lot of people in that industry, and I'm talking quite some time ago, didn't have a lot of faith and trust in sales agents back then, and I think that's where I really started to create a foundation of building that, and that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned, which is interesting because having that skill in recruitment is also quite a significant piece to the puzzle of being quite successful in our industry. Yeah.
Okay. So travel before that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just guessing at the moment. So 15 years in recruitment, real estate for 6 or 7. I mean, you only look like you're about 28.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I started
really
young. Very young.
Yeah, so what was the first job and how old were you then?
Very, very first job where I started earning money. I think I wasn't at legal age of what they call it, 14 and 9 months. I think I was just shy of 14 and got my first job at the local fish and chip store.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So learnt hard work from a very early age.
And do you remember, were you pushed to get that job? Is that something you wanted to do yourself? So, possibly, talk a little bit about family life at the age of 14 and 9 months and money and why you ended up getting that job.
Yeah, I come from more of a country town, and my parents had me at a very, very young age, teenage years. So babies having babies, I guess you would say, and credit to them both in the fact that they worked very hard, but they also lived from week to week. They weren't setting out to establish careers. They were in jobs, and so it was a week-to-week thing, and so money wasn't something that was accessible regularly or something that was discussed in the home. It was always about, keeping bills down and costs down and not spending extravagantly, and, even to the point where, certain groceries were bought and, you didn't go out and buy, luxury treats and things like that. So I think for me, if I wanted to have my own pocket money, and I didn't really get pocket money, and buy my own things, and as you go into those teenage years, there's certain clothing brands and everything. My parents would never bought any of that. That was something that was a luxury that they couldn't afford, and I wanted to go out and make my own money to have the opportunity to buy the things that I wanted and save for the things that I wanted.
Okay, yeah. And that worked for you?
It did. But I think if I look back now and I look at generations today as well, the younger generations coming through, it did establish a very good framework of understanding what hard work is and understanding that, you have to work hard to get the things that you want. Back then we're talking $5 an hour in the hand, so it wasn't a lot of money, but it satisfied my hunger for wanting to break out of the cycle of living week to week like my parents had. Whilst they worked really, really hard, they were still limited in what they could provide and what they could achieve in their own right and lives as well.
Okay.
So obviously, you mentioned it. You gained a good work ethic from that. Where else did your family talk into you? Do you think if you look back and reflect on yourself now and go, I can so see that my upbringing and where I've come from and what's happened has actually created who you are today?
Yeah, I think as I said, credit and kudos to my parents who worked really, really hard, like even to the point where my father would constantly always work every overtime shifts and every weekend to, top up, the financial side of what they had available to them. And that could be so that we could go on a camping trip. There was no overseas trips or, getting on a plane. It was always, going camping and pitching a tent and things like that. So it allowed them the affordability to do that. And I guess my, witnessing that and being a part of it, I just knew that I wanted to have something that was a bigger purpose for me to create a life that gave me a little bit more stability, and allowed me to have the luxury things that I wasn't exposed to.
And I think that old adage, if you work really hard, you're going to be okay. We've shown that that's not really the case in the end, is it? You can work really hard and be still earning a very minimal wage.
Yeah.
You can even go to university and do degrees and still come out only earning a very sort of set wage. So it does really change, and how you look at things and how you reflect on things as to what you can do for yourself to improve that.
Absolutely. And I think for me it was also looking forward. Where did I want to be and what did that look like? But then did I want to have a family, and what did I want my children to? What did I want to give them? And it's not about just giving them, tangible items and things. It's about giving them certain education and certain experiences. For us, one of the biggest things that we love is we do love travelling, and we do travel a lot. And I genuinely love, and a lot of the hard work that I put into what I do is to give them the experiences that we've been giving them of travel and culture, and educating them around different ways of living and the world. And that's something that I was never able to be exposed to.
So were you a good saver as a teenager, or was it money in, money out?
I was a very good saver.
Yeah, okay.
I took the leap at the age of 17 to move from country to Sydney, and that's where I entered the travel world. And I even remember being down in Sydney, and I had this book with envelopes in it, and one would say rent, and one would say bills, and one would say train fare into, that's how I got into the city. And every week when I got my pay, I'd insert, the amount for each one of those, and that was my way of really keeping to the budget and making sure that I was always secure. So I had that safety net, and I'd have my little spend there and my save, but I think the security of making sure that I could pay my way through what I needed to was always really, really important to me.
And was part of that possibly out of a fear of where you've come from?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that. Never wanting to be in a position where I felt insecure because I wasn't able to pay for, whether it be bills or, whatever was coming in at that point in time. Security was huge.
And it's funny because back then, there was probably the internet was pretty scarce.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you could read the latest book or, download an audio book.
I don't even think
like
podcasts were around.
Probably weren't, yeah.
So, you were very limited to the available tools that we have today, definitely. Yeah, to give you the direction and different ways to go, like even to the point where you've got social media and you've got influencers, and that's an additional tool that we never had back then. So the tools were very limited.
And we've often talked on our podcast about that whole financial literacy in Australia. That when you're younger, financial literacy, the research is showing it's quite low. And what it tends to be is that over time, it's that you gain that knowledge through experience.
Yes.
When you buy your first home, when you get your first investment, when you decide, hang on, I want to get managed get a managed fund and get shares. How do I do that? All of a sudden, those things start happening, not because you're being taught it, but because you actually experience it through life. And it sounds like for you, that would be very much the case. You've come from somewhere where the financial literacy was quite poor, and you've had to self-educate and actually, come to that understanding yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably one of the biggest motivators when I moved out of home, still a child at 17, was that even though I wasn't in real estate at that point in time, I had a keen interest in property, and I did actually look at books and look up things around how you gained property portfolios, and I bought my first house at 20, and that was my goal, and I didn't want anyone involved with being a guarantor or buying it with anyone. My mission was to do it myself, and I also bought this very old house that I then renovated. I'd go to Bunnings on weekends, and I'd do the courses that they run, such as painting and tiling, and for me it was the achievement to be self-sufficient without needing anyone else to be able to fund or support me during that journey. And one of the things that I was very adamant about is that I wasn't going to rely on a spouse to be able to do those things. It was something that I needed to do myself. Yeah.
Okay. As blokes, I'm feeling quite small at the moment. So leading on to that, and I think what's important about, even sharing that little bit about Bunnings, there's this, you wanted to remain teachable.
Yes, constantly. Well, and if I go back, let's talk about my goal around, I bought my first house at 20, my second house at 22, and my third house at 25. And knowing the property market and what my income was at that point in time, I wasn't afforded the luxury to buy beautiful houses. I had to buy houses that were really falling apart, and so for me it was then about, okay, how do I get these into a condition where I can then rent them out and get a good rental return to, balance and offset, the interest that I'm paying. There was a very, very defined plan, but I had to learn and grow along the way, with little support and coaching and advice being provided. But in my mind, I was like, well, I need a higher level of rent, so I need to go and educate myself on becoming a renovator to be able to do that.
So moving on to, I guess, this concept of financial literacy and I guess the reasons why people don't get advice, right? So obviously you've gone, and the Bunnings is probably an example where it hasn't cost you a lot to go to Bunnings except your own time, right? So, but have you got any thoughts about, I guess, why people don't ask for advice?
I think it comes back to a lot of people are not educated that the advice is out there and available. I also think that I look back on myself and quite some time ago where the option of seeing a professional advisor or financial support and gaining financial support was quite it was exposing me around what I may not have done right, and looking at what I'm spending my money on. So there's a certain sense of exposure there. So it makes you feel a little bit vulnerable. And I think that does, if I'm feeling that way, then I would imagine there's a lot of people out there that would be feeling the same way. Like the judgment sets in. What do these people think of me? They've just looked at my finances. They've just looked at what I'm spending. What are they thinking right now? And I also think another one is trust. I do believe historically, which I'm sure you might be able to agree, that that professionals in the industry, haven't always led an ethical path around it. So it's the trust in the individual, and I also believe, probably one of the things that I've looked at is, are they walking the walk and talking the talk? If they're giving advice on my finances, have they done it for themselves? What have they achieved themselves, knowing all of this information and the advice that they're providing? So I think there's a lack of that in the industry as well.
I'm going to ask you a cheeky question, all right?
Yes.
So, and that is because you've come from the real estate industry, all right? So, and obviously that's an industry that has its own colourful past, all right? So one of the things that I've quite often reflected in is that financial advisors haven't been perfect in the past, yet the take-up rate of financial planners is probably about 20% of the marketplace. Yet real estate agents have managed to still probably capture something around the 90% of the marketplace, and their trust factor can't be too much different.
No.
So is that anything that, and I know we hadn't really talked about this before, but, just thinking that through, like what comes to mind when you think about that?
I tend to believe that whilst real estate agents have their history of and perception out there of certain ethics, they're selling a tangible product.
Okay.
And vendors and or buyers have a sense of value in what they're looking at and what they're buying, regardless of who is, I guess, influencing that transaction. The challenge that you have is you don't have anything that's tangible, and the advice that you're giving it's based on what you know. And also your reputation, which is a little bit more challenging. Now, I wouldn't say that it's fair, but that tangible piece probably, I believe it does have a big impact.
And it's a really good point, because whether it's, through Help My Wealth or any sort of advice, which is about knowledge, it's about that, and I guess we live in a society today where there's so much information available. So there is this natural tendency for people to go, I can get that for free.
Yes.
All right. So now, which we might argue or say that, yes, but there's so much information, it's very easy to also get the wrong information as well. And so finding the right person helps to cut through that journey. But I think you've made an excellent point, and well done for coming up with that on the spot.
I was going to add, I think it's also about long-term, short-term. Yeah. If you're selling a house, you're like, right, I need this sold within a month or 2 months or whatever else. And so you actually are motivated. We go back to that comfortable thing. I've got to get out of my comfort zone. I've got to find someone. I've got to decide I'm going to trust this person. They're going to actually go ahead and sell it, and then we can go from there. When it comes to thinking about financial planning, that's often a long-term goal. It's not about, I need to change my finances today. It's about going, okay, what's going to happen when I turn 50, when I turn 60, when I turn 70, do you know? So I think there's also a limit of long-term, short-term.
Yeah, and I think from a younger self, prioritising that financial piece isn't something that people will look at first and foremost. I think in my 20s and I didn't prioritise it as probably as well as I should have. Going into late 30s and early 40s, it is something that you look back and say, I should have done that. I also, on reflection, the cost of the service, it's a very unknown, and it's a fear of, if I go to someone, are they going to charge me? So I think the knowledge out there of what it does cost and what the regularity of that is, and, what do I get for what I pay? It's a very unknown, because I think there's a lot of firms out there that there's inconsistency with those costs. Like there's such a big difference between one firm to the other. And I don't know, I'm not in your industry, but whether that's been regulated at all, or if it's up to the firms around what they actually charge. But I know back then, that was probably one of the things that stopped me from reaching out to professionals. I just don't know if I can fund that right now. It wasn't a priority of importance.
I'll make sure I cut you a check for your advice later on. So.
Thank you.
So moving on to Verve, all right, and your current role in the recruitment industry, and I guess one of the things with that we believe is part of Help My Wealth is just that you can invest well, you can manage your finances well, but you have to manage yourself well and your career So I'm really, well, we're really interested to just get a little bit of an understanding from you in terms of, so when you see candidates, if you were to offer the listeners some advice around, what does, call it, career management look like from a person today? What do you see, and what's the low-hanging fruit that people need to be thinking about when it comes to managing their career?
The biggest thing right now, and especially within the world we work right now, is really reviewing your skill set and making sure that there's a transferable skill set. You're constantly looking for that next area of development and stepping up, and making sure that you're ready. Don't look at your role right now. What's your next role? And constantly striving towards and working towards upskilling yourself for that. The biggest thing that we know in the world of work right now is AI is taking over a lot of things. There are roles out there that will become redundant, and if you're in a position where there's AI surrounding your role or your workplace, what does that mean for you, and how are you actually upskilling yourself to really make yourself more valuable and you don't become redundant? Or think about where you start diversifying your skills to be able to move and pivot where you're going to be most valuable as well. I think the biggest thing for people is, constantly making themselves more valuable to employers, and upskilling is huge. The biggest thing that I would also say to a lot of people is, make sure that you are networking internally and externally, and that you are known and seen. And that the leadership within your organisation understands the direction you're heading. That communication piece, and them knowing where you'd like to be, in 2 years and 3 years and 5 years, puts you in the spotlight to be earmarked for those next roles. One of the biggest things that we know is approaching is the baby boomers approaching retirement. So what does that mean for the next generation coming through? And two things there are employers actually now succession planning for that and that movement, because there's going to be a big gap of knowledge missing. But then what are employees doing to actually be able to put in the spotlight, upskilling themselves to be considered for these, senior roles?
And I think one of the things you said that I just find so important is the putting yourself out there. The amount of times I've talked to someone and they say, this is where I want to head. And you say, have you discussed that with your boss? No, not at all. You're like, well, unless you actually tell them where you want to go and what you want to do and what you want to achieve, they can't help you get there. They may not even put you forward for a role that you really want to do because they have no idea that you're interested in going that direction. And as soon as they know you're interested, one of two things are going to happen. They're either going to say, I'm really sorry, Bob, but you're not the right person for that role. That allows you then to work out why. Or they're going to say to you, hey, yeah, we can train you, we can get you ready, we can move you forward, we can do whatever you want to do. But if you don't actually put yourself out there, you're not going to find out the answer as to whether you're ready for it or not ready for it, or what you have to do to become ready for it.
Absolutely. And the questions that employees should be asking their employers is, this is where I'd like to be. Can you tell me what I need to achieve to get there and how long it'll take me to get there?
Yeah.
The biggest thing that the advice that I can give employees or people who are in the workplace looking for roles or whatever it might be is make a plan. At the end of the day, if you don't make a plan, then you plan to fail. That's the reality of it. So you've got to have a plan, and it can't be a short-term view of what is the next 12 months, what's the next 5 years, because it does take a staged approach. And also, if you've got to upskill yourself, and that comes back to going outside of just the environment of those soft skills, then it takes time. Yeah.
And that's a good thing to bring up. So what's the difference in your industry when you're talking to lots of people that are looking for different jobs or moving around, experience versus, education? So certificates and diplomas and going to TAFE and going to uni and doing courses compared to the experience you've had, is it 50-50? Is it 70-30? Like, what's the sort of percentage that people need to be able to do that?
It's a really, really good question, especially in the current market. I mean, as you know, and most listeners would know, it's been a skill short market for 3 years now. The biggest thing that people are looking for now, whilst some jobs require certain qualifications, it's come back to the soft skills. It's come back to transferable skills, and it's also come back to attitudes.
Yeah.
Attitudes and behaviours are a bigger requirement in terms of good ones, as opposed to someone having a certificate or a certain qualification.
So how does someone put that forward in an interview? I mean, you're coming from one job, say, to another job. How do you – it's not like you can get referrals from your past job to say that you were a great team player or whatever else. Often, you're not letting the job you're currently at know that you're looking for other jobs.
Well, you see a good recruiter and they advocate for you.
Yeah.
No, and like I'm going to be quite genuine. I was being cheeky there.
That's right.
But absolutely, like in terms of what we do, like we create relationships with candidates. We understand their direction and provide them support and guidance around which way they should go, or solutions around options of which way they can head. We can talk to them about different organisations. People have different ethics and values, and they want to find, well, I would highly recommend that they find an employer that has a really great alignment. At the end of the day, you have to love what you do, but you've also got to have an employer that excites you with their vision and their mission. So it doesn't just come back to money. It comes back to the journey that you're on with your employer and having an alignment there. So with what we do, we really consult and we really talk to the individuals, and then we identify and assess where they would be best suitable and introduce them to the right employer that we think would be great for them. A lot of candidates don't present themselves well on a resume. They don't present themselves well sitting in front of someone if they haven't been coached accurately and properly. And this is where we can come in and be that advocate and communicate that level of detail for them, and also for the employer to be able to be introduced to someone they wouldn't have ordinarily considered.
And I think for the average Australian particularly, selling themselves is hard. There's some people that's just natural, they can do it. But for the average person to walk into an interview and say, I am the best person for this job. There is no one that you're going to interview better than me. I am amazing. Most people find that very difficult to actually put forward and go from there. So, having a recruiter who can actually coach them, help them to say the right words, know how to actually put themselves forward, even from the point of view of, I think a lot of people go for jobs and they haven't actually written out what are their positive and negative traits. So when the question gets asked, how do you answer that if you haven't thought about it beforehand and actually gone through it with someone else? It's
quite daunting, and I don't think a lot of people out there realise how much you have to prepare to be able to go and sit in front of a prospective employer and absolutely sell yourself to the best possible way that you can. And I would say that a lot of my team are very good at coaching and sitting down with their candidates before they go and meet one of our clients to really coach them through, not to say the right answers. I think there's a misconception of we coach so that they say the right thing so the employer says yes. It's about getting them to reach a level of comfortability to really talk about themselves and sell themselves.
Totally, absolutely.
Because naturally as humans, we don't sell ourselves very well. Good at selling other people, but not ourselves. Like, it's not a natural trait that comes easily to people. So we get them to reach a level of comfortability to be able to do that and talk about themselves and really sell the attributes that they don't realise they have until we bring it to their attention.
And so, look, while we're talking about recruiting, I think a lot of people, when they hear about a recruitment firm and they think about CEOs and general managers and managers, they don't don't think about the other jobs. So, can you tell our listeners, what's the range of sort of jobs that both your firm and other firms do?
Yeah, every firm will be different in terms of what they specialise in. If I specifically talk about Verve Partners, our roles will range anything from your general data entry, receptionist, administrator, personal assistants, right through to the executive. As I said before, all of our recruiters are they specialise in their own area, so they're specialists. And one thing that I would really recommend candidates and or clients, that if you're going to go through a recruiter and establish a partnership with a recruiter, don't gravitate to someone who's a generalist, because you're reliant on them to know everything about every sector and every market, and expecting them to work with every client and every candidate. The reason we've tailored our business to be true specialists is every one of our consultants only works within their own sector. So my engineering consultant only works engineering, which means she can really build a talent pool and a network that she is constantly talking to all the time, and she will just work with clients who she's able to place those candidates with. So to answer your question, anything from that very entry-level role right through to executive, but then it comes down to the disciplines that we work across, being legal, construction, engineering, and in their own right in those disciplines, that's when they also work with very junior candidates right to senior, whether it be law firms, legal secretaries right through to qualified lawyers across all different spaces, or engineering, your grads right through to, your senior engineers and management roles in that industry. So it's specialised, and then very entry level right to senior.
And so if you're a young person and you're just starting out in your career and you're just sort of getting going, is it worth coming to see a recruitment firm to say, hey, look, I don't have a lot of experience, but this is where I want to head? Or is it better for you to build up your experience first in a certain area and then come to see a recruiter?
We are a fee-for-service based industry, so clients actually pay us a fee to find them very experienced and very skilled individuals in the areas that they're looking. So for anyone who's a school leaver or very junior in their career, ordinarily it's very difficult probably for us to help them in that first instance. We would always recommend that they go and continue to upskill themselves, get a little bit more experience, and whether that be that they do some volunteer experience work within, if they want to go office-based or whatever it might be that they're wanting to venture into, get that build up. Most importantly, also, what they need references as well. They need people to speak on their behalf around their performance and how they've been able to, work well in the environment that they've been placed in. Once someone's built up a level of skills, that's when we can then start supporting them as a recruiter. But it does make it very challenging for us, because we are a fee-for-service based industry, so that experience is heavily reliant. Our clients are heavily relying on us to have that.
But I guess it's like you said, whether you're just starting out in your career or whether you've been doing it for 15 years, you've got to have that, goal. Where are you heading in 1 year? Where do you want to head in 5 years? So if you're 20 years old and you're just starting out in a job, where do you want to be at 25? Where do you want to be at 30? And then actually have that set up to actually start moving towards that. If that means that you need to go and get a certificate or a diploma or a degree, then you start working towards that. Do you know what I mean? If it means that you need to have experience in the area, then you start developing experience, be it voluntary or be it paid.
Correct. Yeah. I think the biggest challenge for young people coming into the workforce and trying to identify what do they want to do.
Yes.
I think what I would say to them is, what do you enjoy doing? What are you passionate about? So that they can then align that into the areas that they go into. They have to love what they're doing.
Yeah, and I find when I've spoken to a lot of younger people as well, sometimes it's money orientated. They're like, oh, hang on, I'm just trying to get a job. I just need a job for money, and you go, well, hang on, all jobs are going to give you money. So that's a foregone conclusion. Now, the amount of money you get may change, but you're going to get a job that's going to give you a reward financially. So take that off the table and start thinking about what do you love, what burns, what's your burn, what's your passion, where do you want to head, and then go, okay, well, how do I actually achieve that? How do I get there? Someone that I know is actually a zookeeper at Dubbo Zoo. He's the head of the black rhino enclosure, and it was really interesting talking to him. He's only a young guy, but the process for him to get from there to where he is now required an immense amount of voluntary work. Like he was working in a cafe at the zoo. He'd done all his courses. He'd done all his things. He could work in the zoo, but there was no job.
Yeah. So
he literally worked in a cafe in the zoo and was available to work voluntary wherever they needed him for any time. He did that for like a year and a half, and then all of a sudden they put him in casual. Then he kept on doing it, voluntary, casual, he'd work whatever they wanted him to. And then finally a position comes up, and who are they going to offer it to? They're going to offer it to this guy that has shown that he's passionate and actually wants to do it. Dedication.
Yeah.
And then now here a few years later, it comes up, hey, who's going to take over the black rhinos? And he's the obvious candidate because he's actually had a goal in place from a young age.
And I also think, people out there should be looking at mentors. Whichever avenue they want to go or industry they want to go into, who is someone that they can look up to that's been really successful in that industry. The really interesting thing about mentors and perception of mentors is that people think once they've got one they have to stay with them. You outgrow your mentors, and as someone who would be mentoring someone, you want that to happen. You want them to outgrow you so they keep evolving and they keep growing. But something that I wished I had done back earlier on in my career was establish a good foundation of mentors who I looked up to, who I was speaking to regularly, and use them as a sounding board, as a growth stepping stone for myself.
And I think actually formalising that and saying to the person, I really value your opinion. Would you help mentor me in this area?
Yeah.
And I think, like you said as well, recognise where they're good at. They may be amazing in their industry, but are they good at finances? Well, then don't talk to them about finances. Talk to them about the industry that you want to do. Are they good with their relationships with their, family and their children and their partner? Maybe yes, no. Well, then that's not the area that you get another mentor that's good at that. So get people in their right lane.
Yeah, and I also think there's a perception out there that mentors are a cost or they're expensive. Mentors don't have to be professionals who are just, like coaches. Mentors can be someone who has been in your position and they've developed themselves and grown themselves, and they're 5 years ahead of you. And you want to do it. You want to walk a similar path to what they have. So it doesn't have to be someone that you are forking out money to for their advice. It's someone that you're catching up with regularly, and you talk about, their journey and how you set out for your own journey. I also recommend that for people starting out in their careers, establish an understanding of what networking platforms they should be involved with, whether it be in-person events, social, online. Even Newcastle, and you would have heard of it, has Honey Young Professionals. That's fantastic for people who are actually wanting to establish a really good career path and be constantly, speaking to and collaborating with people of the same age who are really, really excited about their career journey.
So I'm going to take you back a bit, all right? So you've gone on this tangent. So I'm really interested in, and because not everyone understands this, is when you talk about soft skills, all right, so what do you mean? Like I remember at 19, my mum said, go and learn to touch type. All right, so I remember going, blokes don't touch type, but right
How do you
now
feel about
today,
that now?
I've loved it, absolutely loved it.
I can actually tell you that one of the things I'm jealous of when it comes to Hamish is watching him touch type while he's doing something else or talking to me, and I'm just like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
It is insane.
Yeah.
But I remember being at 19, 18 and being in a room full of women, all right, learning to touch type, being the only bloke in the room. But it's a skill that you sort of go, okay, so is that a soft skill? Is that what you mean by a soft skill? And if you were to talk through, I don't know if you can think on the spot about any examples of people that you've come through where you've sort of gone, hey, this is the soft skill that you need to develop. What's some of that low-hanging fruit when it comes to those skills?
Yeah, there is different opinions on soft skills. Mine very much gravitate to individual attributes around. We talked about, what I learnt in real estate. It was establishing those relationship building skills. It was establishing influential skills. It was learning the craft and art of being able to build a level of trust with individuals. The soft skills come back to the individual and around how they're able to, outside of just gaining certificates and skills and qualifications. Typing could be seen as one of them, but it's more about the attributes of an individual and bringing them out and being able to utilise them. That would then base that on performance and behaviours. Soft skill very much relates to behaviours as well, and how individuals can actually really drive them to then become a skill and a craft. The art of being able to influence, it's a very big soft skill. Not easy to do. Comes with time and, listening to mentors and listening to the people around you. But it becomes a soft skill that becomes really important.
So communication
Huge.
and leadership,
Yes.
or at least, and almost understanding what it means to be a team player and not sort of want to take over everything. Like you'll get that person that sort of thinks that their job is to stay quiet and be in the corner and they need to get out of their skin. And then you've got the person that's too overt and too big, if I can use that expression, that they almost need to go, wait a second, what's my space here? What am I here to do? Yeah.
Yeah, and I even think the art of collaboration is huge, because you're right, you've got people who will speak up and people who won't, but having someone or people in your team that actually collectively encourages everyone to participate is quite significant in how your team will perform and the engagement that you have.
One of the questions I've heard lately, I don't know if you've heard of Gallup before. So Gallup Strengths Test it is. So they do a lot of research on workplace, and they've got this survey that they've for managers. And one of the questions that I'm actually just I've never asked in 20 odd years is, so are you the sort of person that will tell me how you're feeling, or do I have to ask?
What an interesting question.
And then the follow-up question to that is, so how often would you like me to sit down and actually talk about how you're going? And they're just one of those, they're just questions they're simple questions, right? So, but the conversations that come out of that when you ask the staff that is just quite powerful.
And I think actually it's a really important point to make is that you learned that. So sometimes these soft skills aren't innate within us.
Correct.
And I think sometimes people who are, say, more introvert feel as though I could never do that. In the same way people more extrovert need to pull back. But it's funny, like I never forget, even just using that analogy form, when it comes to talking to people and you're like, hang on, how do I actually bring up conversation? And that's the, family, organisations, recreation and money. And if you have that in your head, I've talked to lots of people who are introverts and said to them, that's all you need to remember. If you're ever in conversations with someone, just start with family. If they're not talking about it, it's not a touch point for them. Move on to organisations. If they're not in an organisation and they're not doing anything, move on to recreation. What do you do when you're not working, If that doesn't work, move on to money. I can almost guarantee you that you will stop somewhere along that form, and the conversation will flow because the person will actually start talking about what's the touch point for them. And that's a learnt behaviour. Some people innately can do it, but a lot of people actually have to learn those soft skills.
I also think that that line of questioning has evolved over time as well. Like if you ask questions like that 20 years ago, the response would be very, very different. You know, we're now in a world where that emotional intelligence is quite huge in being able to cultivate a team that you know, feels comfortable in their environment, feels comfortable in speaking up and being able to talk. But the offset of that is the fact that if we're able to create more of that in the organisation, it does increase it does increase performance, it does increase productivity, and it does create a better culture for people to be really happy with where they are.
Oh, absolutely. So we've talked about soft skills, all right. So, and what we've talked about as well is just this concept of even being prepared as a young person to get in and get experience, you know, like and have that attitude, which was another word Krystle used before. Like, you know, so what are some ways that, you know, when you're talking to candidates, that you can sort of unpack what people's attitude is and what are they going in with? You know, like, can you talk into that at all?
Yeah, a lot of our line of questioning and a lot of our consultants will be very much adverse around talking about behavioural-based interview questions. So it's assessing someone's approach to certain situations and how they handle things and how they manage things, and by way of asking those sort of questions and that line of questioning, we can really understand the individual and how they would operate in an environment, leveraging off the experiences of certain situations that they've been through previously with employment. It gives us a true indication of an individual and how they will respond and react. Probably the biggest thing that I have realised throughout my career in recruitment is there's two steps in that line of questioning and that conversation with candidates. One, it's the behavioural-based interview questions, which most recruiters, I would expect, follow through with following that process. The other one is feedback, which a lot of that doesn't happen for the candidate. So if you're speaking to the candidate and you're assessing them and you're asking these behavioural-based interview questions, and there are responses that you feel are a bit of alarming or, probably not what the employer might be looking for or most employers looking for, what you find is a lot of recruiters out there will refrain from giving feedback around that. One of the biggest things that we like to offer is, feedback for them to improve. If they don't know, how do they ever have the opportunity to grow and develop themselves in their next interview or their next job application? So something that we're really, really driving in the business and very adamant about doing is providing that feedback. If a candidate says, you ask them a behavioural-based interview question, and it's about a situation that they handled in the workplace which presented to be a conflict with another colleague, and their response isn't necessarily the one that you would generally gravitate to, then you coach them around it. You say, it's really interesting that you would respond that way. Tell me more about that. Ordinarily, it's probably not a favoured behaviour within workplaces. How would you like to improve that? That is lacking in a lot of interview scenarios for individuals. And I don't know about you, but I thrive on feedback. It helps me grow and develop and become better if it's delivered the right way and with the intent of being genuine and helpful. I believe most people would be quite receptive to it.
It must be challenging though at times being in a tight labour market when you get some of these statements that come out that you sort of go, oh, okay, I need to give the feedback, but I don't have a lot of candidates for this role, and then trying to assess whether that person is still suitable to be put forward to the employer. Is that a bit of a tension at times?
It's definitely frustrating, but I think for our business, and I only speak for our business, it's not about getting a placement and getting an invoice out. It's about getting the right person that is a suitable fit. And at the end of the day, we offer a replacement guarantee. Very rarely do we ever have to use it. And commercially, we don't want to have to use it. We want to get it right the first time. Primarily, 70 to 80% of our business is repeat business. And it is that because we don't focus on just getting a placement and a fee and raising an invoice. We focus on getting the right person and making sure they don't have to go through that process again. So, yeah, look, it can be a little bit frustrating. She's like, oh, they've got every single skill that this client has asked for. But unfortunately, if they're not going to be the right fit culturally, and it only takes one person to go into an environment and turn a really great business and a really great team upside down, so to speak, to ruin what was there. We don't want to be the individuals who are a part of that.
Fair enough. Yeah, well, I know, we were talking about another interview earlier on, and there can be this, conservative or old-fashioned type, why can't people just appreciate they're being given a job versus, the current environment, which is, young people basically, quite often saying, well, wait a second, I feel like I'm entitled, not necessarily saying entitled is a bad way, but, I need to be treated well and I need to command respect as well. So, there is these two battles going on, isn't there? And just, how the workplace works. Well,
I think both those two things can be right.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? Like the employer needs to expect a certain level of teamwork and accountability and work ethic from their employee, and the employee wants an employer who's going to treat them well and look after them and not be in a bad team environment or go home feeling anxious and have high anxiety from the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the biggest contribution to a lot of what's going on right now and I guess the tension and the tug of war around it is that more and more people have being exposed to what does health and wellbeing look like and being in an environment that is able to support a really healthy balance. Whilst I guess for lack of a better term, the old school term is, you've got a job, you get paid, you should be happy. That doesn't necessarily mean that environment that they're in creates a happy environment and contentment. And the biggest thing that is being discussed, within workplaces and outside of workplaces is health and wellbeing. And I think that the biggest step businesses can make is to find establish an understanding around what their employees really want from their employer, but also set some boundaries around what the employer wants from an employee as well. So it has to be a nice, even balance. That has to be set right at the beginning prior to anyone joining the firm so that both parties can see an alignment. If that potential employee doesn't see a sense of value in those boundaries, then it's best that they don't join the business and vice versa.
It's interesting. You talked earlier on about that, possibly for the next couple of years and also the last few years that the employment market has been, quite tight, and you've touched on AI a little bit. One of the things that we're sort of now starting to hear on the financial planning side is that this gap in employment could go on for 30 or 40 years. And the reason for it is there's sort of this story that goes something like this. You talked about COVID and how it fast forwarded some people's decisions, right? And so what happened was maybe before COVID there was this logic that said, well, for every person that retires, a new person's coming into the workplace. All right. So now what happened with COVID is that 5%. Five people retired and only one person came back into the workplace. And a lot of school leavers as well were a little bit delayed, right, in terms of they weren't allowed to have that social interaction that prior generations would have gotten. So there's almost this, well, wait a second, we've left 5 leave, one's come in, but really it's going to take that one a little while to grow up and be, a valuable part of the workforce. All right, so now, of course, we only had 6% unemployment, all right, and now it's dropped to 3, but we had 5 leave and 1 come in, so there's this gap. And of course, as time goes on, right, so, by, I think it's 2040, right, America, China, a lot of parts of the world are going to be in declining populations. Right, so and off the back of that, so we're all farming out of Africa and some parts of Asia to try and bring this immigration in, because they're the only parts of the world that's really growing, right, from a population perspective. So the logic is AI going to take the jobs away, or do we almost need the AI, right, to actually keep everything going? And I think you'd both agree that, how recently, if you tried to call a bank or some sort of provider and stay on the phone for 45 minutes or an hour because they can't get the staff, so this environment that we're in at the moment, it may actually go on for quite a long period of time. So it'll be interesting, and that's where possibly industries like recruitment, well, okay, it could be a good season to really say, okay, how do we really make sure that we're positioned to be able to be that intermediary, is that the word I'm looking for? Yeah, that actually sits in between all of that.
And it is really interesting, and I think this is where I've touched on it before. Being a specialist recruitment firm and having a dedicated focus to an industry and sector with our consultants allows them to build the network required. Now, network inclusive of clients and potential candidates for the future. Job movement is still happening out there. I was only reading the other day that job mobility in the last 12 months is at its highest peak in the last 10 years. And I believe it's 1.3 million Australians in the last 12 months have left a job. So there's still movement out there. What I think I believe the impact of it is that people have left industries, they're upskilling. There is a delay in the skills, people being able to reach the level of skills that are needed within workplaces, and the training component involved. That's where you will see the significant impact. People are still leaving jobs. People are still getting new jobs, and interestingly enough, the biggest reasons that they're leaving is, they're wanting progression. So whether or not they're coming into businesses and, training and upskilling but not moving fast enough, poor job satisfaction, people are wanting to They are leaving for either more money or benefits. Benefits is a huge requirement these days within organisations. Some people are moving for benefits before leaving for money, which is really, really interesting. And a lot of people out there, still are uneducated business operators around benefits. What are benefits? Some people think that letting someone go to a doctor's appointment during work hours is a benefit. Others are really upping the ante on their benefits. We've introduced a quarterly mental health day for full-time permanent employees. We're offering some end-of-year family leave that is paid during a closure period for employees. There's so many different things that we're starting to offer. There's gym memberships, there's health and wellness. We've got a wellness committee in our business where 3 employees run that, and we provide them a budget. So they're constantly doing different things all the time to, support that balance of health and wellbeing. They're all the benefits that people out in the market are looking for. Hybrid working models, huge right now. The concept of people wanting to work from home 100% has diminished. Obviously, we're past that phase, but people have started to realise that a hybrid model offers them a balance of, for example, if you've got families, dropping kids off, picking them up. But the biggest thing that I've seen, which it does impact the livelihood of families, is before and after school care. It's really expensive. If businesses are offering hybrid model and flexibility around those hours, it means that families don't have to spend so much on before and after school care, and they can pocket that money themselves and put it towards other things that they're trying to save for or bills. So they're the key benefits that are really driving people's motivation in the market at the moment.
Well, we've actually coming to the end of our podcast. So I did want to actually put forward, so we've got a question here for you. So I want you to finish the following sentences. Are you ready?
Sure.
The problem with money is...
The problem with money is creates too much power, but it also creates greed.
Nice.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay. Money can't buy happiness, but it can...
It can buy opportunities.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. Now, we do like to ask all of our guests, if you could give some advice to your 18-year-old self, what would you say to her?
Oh, so much. How long have you got? Probably the key advice that I would give to myself is don't compare.
Yep. Don't compare yourself.
Don't compare yourself to anyone else.
Yep.
Live at your own expectations and not through anyone else's.
Yep.
And trust your instinct.
Yep. Yep. And our last question we always ask everyone is, if you were going to write a book, what would the title be and what would it be about?
Oh, wow. I'm not sure anyone would read it. I mean, I guess it would be about a journey of me, but I'm considered to be the black sheep in the family.
Yeah.
And I've always probably gone against the grain and not gone with the crowd. So I guess I'd have to go with something around living as the black sheep.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a marketing book on the purple cow, so you
have
can't take that one.
Yeah. So you could be the living as the black sheep.
Yeah.
Or live like the black sheep.
I think perception of the black sheep has always been a negative one, but there is a positive
totally.
positive through it as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think most people that have done well in life would often say they've swum against the tide. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
They've gone against what other people are doing. You know, so I think that to be successful, you sort of have to be a bit of a black sheep in a way.
You do, and if you're following a crowd, you have to see what they've achieved first.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
We've really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah.
So it's been good to have you.
It's been wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problems at all. So thank you again for listening to the Help My Wealth podcast, Money Rules, Money Rules. It's been really great to have Krystle here with us, and we've really appreciated listening and learning about recruitment and about jobs and about life. So thank you again, and we'll see you at the next podcast. Bye for now.
Bye.
The information discussed by the Help My Wealth and the Money Rules podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only and is general in nature, and it is not advice. It is not intended as a substitute for professional finance, legal or tax advice. It is aimed to provide a general understanding of each topic and should not be relied upon to make an investment or financial decision. It is strongly suggested that you seek professional advice regarding your own individual circumstances before making a financial decision. Help My Wealth and the hosts of the Money Rules and Money Rules podcast are not aware of your personal financial circumstances. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement and, if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. Do not take financial advice from a podcast. In the spirit of reconciliation, Help My Wealth and the Money Rules or Money Rules podcasts acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to past, present and emerging elders. We extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today.